I'm just a simple smuggler. All I wanted was to get to the spaceport without getting robbed or killed. Turns out both those things still happened anyway. It's a rough life being a smuggler. No steady income, constant danger, and somehow I never seem to get a break. Take this trip, for example. I was hired to deliver a package across the Ring City. Easy money, right? Wrong. As soon as I got close to the spaceport, I got ambushed. Not by pirates or bounty hunters, but by a bunch of kids on hoverboards. Yeah, you heard right, kids. I ended up spending more credits than I earned on that job. And now, I'm stuck on the wrong side of town with a broken speeder and no way to fix it. Until I remembered an old mechanic named Rook. Problem was, he lived in the Crow's Nest, a sector so dangerous even the patrol ships avoided it. I could either pay someone else to fix my ship, or I could do what any sane smuggler would do and try to steal parts from the junkyards of the Crow's Nest. So that's what I did. Turns out the junkyards weren't just full of junk. I stumbled across a whole fleet of derelict freighters, each one bigger than the last. The biggest one even had a working tractor beam, which is lucky because it's not easy hauling parts out of a graveyard. But once I got my haul loaded up, I figured I was home free. Ha! Wrong again. That's when I met Rook. He wasn't much to look at, but he knew every freighter in this graveyard like it was family. And he was immediately all over my parts, telling me which ones were good, which ones were bad, which ones were dangerous, which ones weren't. And then he pointed me to the best salvage in the whole yard, a cargo ship that looked deceptively ordinary, except for the faint energy signature that lingered near its hull. According to Rook, it was just a freighter that got a bit too close to the explosion, but I could tell there was more to it. There was something hidden in that ship, something important enough to warrant extra security even in death. And that meant only one thing: treasure. Of course, you can't just walk up to a haunted ship and start looting it, not if you want to stay dead. So I scrounged together what little shielding I had left and set up camp nearby. I was going to wait until nightfall, hide in the shadows, and sneak aboard. Simple plan. What could go wrong? Well, how about a heavily armed pirate crew looking for a place to hide from the patrol ships? They attacked the moment I finished setting up camp, and although I managed to hold them off for a while, there were just too many of them. As they closed in, I pretended to surrender, hoping to lure them into the freighter. It was risky, but it worked. The pirates, eager to claim their prize, rushed forward. And as they passed the open hatch, I made my move. I took the controls and blasted us straight into the heart of the Crow's Nest. The pirates weren't expecting it. They struggled to bring their weapons up as we tore through the junkyards, diving between derelict ships, narrowly missing a scrap heap. Finally, I brought the freighter down hard onto the deck of an abandoned cruiser. We skidded to a halt, sending sparks flying. I cut the engines and turned to the pirates. "So," I asked, "who wants to go exploring?" Some of them looked terrified, others angry, but they all had one thing in common. They were armed to the teeth. I was outnumbered, outgunned, and I knew I wouldn't survive this without some serious firepower. The question was, where could I find weapons powerful enough to take on a pirate crew? Well, as luck would have it, I had a pretty good idea. In the chaos of the crash, I must have knocked loose a ventilation shaft. And as the pirates moved to attack, I ducked inside. I figured I'd find nothing but cramped tunnels and toxic air, maybe a few spiders for company. What I didn't expect was a whole underground bazaar filled with everything a smuggler could need, and that included weapons. I found a pair of pulse pistols that looked like they'd been custom-made for a Twi'lek, along with a data pad that had a few tricks of its own. And let's just say that dealing with pirates became a lot easier with new toys in hand. The old alien's silence was louder than the roar of engines still cooling behind the soldiers. He didn't rush down the ramp. He didn't even acknowledge their kneeling at first. Instead, he turned to me, the lines on his face deepened by something older than time itself. His hand, scaled, trembling yet steady in purpose, rested briefly on my shoulder. "Human," he said, his voice softer now. "You have shown kindness when the galaxy chose blindness. Remember this moment, for it is the turning of tides." The commander lifted his head slightly, confusion flickering across his hard features. He hadn't expected to see his sovereign speaking to me. He hadn't expected me at all. 2 guards moved forward, gesturing to escort the old alien aboard, but with a single flick of his claw, he halted them. "Not yet," he commanded, his tone laced with a king's authority. "First, I would walk." The crowd still knelt in fearful silence. Nobody dared to breathe too loud, let alone move. The old alien took a slow step, then another, his back no longer stooped. He walked with a dignity that seemed to bend the very air around him. And I, against all reason, walked beside him. The commander finally spoke, his voice echoing through his helmet's speakers. "We searched 1,000 cycles for you, Majesty. Worlds burned in your absence. Dynasties crumbled. The bloodline was thought extinct." "I was not extinct," the old alien replied sharply. "I was discarded, forgotten." He paused, glancing sideways at me with something that looked almost like pride. And yet, when all my own kin turned blind, it was a human who saw. Whispers rippled through the armored ranks. Even the commander shifted uneasily. I had no idea what I'd stumbled into, but it was clear that whatever throne this man, or rather this king, had once sat upon, it wasn't a small one. The soldiers rose at his command and formed a protective circle around us. Civilians scattered, giving the procession space. My stomach twisted with unease. I wasn't supposed to be part of this. I was just a man catching a shuttle. One of the guards stepped too close, gesturing for me to move aside, but before I could, the old king's voice cut through like a blade. "He stays." The soldier froze. "Majesty," the commander began carefully, "this human saved me," the old king interrupted. His words rang like judgment. "When I was nothing more than a shadow, that debt is etched, and no king forgets a debt." I swallowed hard. My palms were slick. Soldiers armed to the teeth stared at me with confusion and contempt. Me, a stranger, a nobody. But the old king had declared it. Whatever storm was brewing, I was already in the center of it. The commander inclined his head. "As you wish, sovereign, but we must depart. The galaxy will not stay quiet when it learns you live." The old alien's eyes narrowed. "It is time they learned." With that, the procession advanced. The ramp swallowed us into the belly of the largest warship. Inside, the air smelled sharp, metallic, the hum of reactors vibrating through the walls. Soldiers flanked the halls, every one of them lowering their gaze as their king passed. We entered a chamber vast enough to house a palace, banners unfurled from the ceiling, symbols of a dynasty I didn't recognize, yet somehow understood. Power, lineage, dominion. The king eased into a high-backed throne at the chamber's center. For a brief second, he looked tired again, the weight of years pressing down. But then his gaze snapped to life, commanding once more. "Report!" The commander knelt. "Majesty, since your disappearance, the council fractured. Rivals carved apart your empire. 3 factions war endlessly over what remains. None believed you lived. Your return will ignite everything." The old alien's mandibles flexed, neither a smile nor a frown. "Then let them ignite. Let them remember what it means to bow before the crown." The commander hesitated. "And the human?" Dozens of alien eyes turned to me at once. I felt the weight of 100 stares pressing me into the floor. The king's voice was steady. "He will not be left behind." The commander's jaw tightened under his helmet. "He is an outsider." "He is my witness," the king said firmly. His gaze locked on me, piercing, unyielding. "In a galaxy that will call me myth, he will stand as proof. No empire can erase kindness. No blade can cut debt. He will walk with me." My throat went dry. Walk with him? Me? I wanted to protest. to say I didn't belong, that I wasn't ready for whatever this was, but the words caught in my chest. Because deep down, something told me this was bigger than fear. The commander gave a stiff nod, though unease radiated from him. As you command. The king leaned back, exhaling as though releasing centuries of weight. Human, he said, his voice gentler now. What is your name? I hesitated. Daniel. He closed his eyes, as though committing it to eternity. Then he whispered, Daniel, you may not yet understand what you have done, but history will. Before I could answer, alarms blared through the ship. Lights strobed red. The commander rose instantly, barking orders. Multiple contacts emerging from slipstream, a voice shouted from the comms. Hostile signatures, dozens! The chamber shook with the first impact. Somewhere outside, weapons fired. The galaxy, it seemed, had already learned the truth. And it was coming for us. The king did not flinch. His eyes burned like fire. So it begins. And beside him, for reasons I couldn't yet name, I didn't run. I stood. The old king didn't flinch. His eyes were locked on the holomap projecting from the center of the chamber. Dozens of red markers surrounded us, blinking hostile signatures. 3 green markers, our ships, stood against the swarm. It wasn't a fair fight. Factions wasted no time, the commander snarled. They must have tracked the signature of our descent. At least 2 rival dynasties, maybe more. Of course they came, the king said, his voice calm amidst the chaos. A crown does not reappear without blood being spilled. The commander slammed a gauntleted fist on the console. Majesty, we must retreat. We can't hold against this fleet. The king's gaze turned sharp. And flee? To vanish again into whispers? No. Today the galaxy remembers. Another blast shook the ship, throwing me to the floor. My palms stung as I scrambled back up. The sound of tearing metal somewhere deep in the hull gnawed at my nerves. This wasn't just noise. This was war, raw and real. Human, the commander said, turning to me suddenly as if searching for something. His eyes narrowed. You have no place here. Get him to the auxiliary hold. He barked at 2 guards. They moved toward me, hands outstretched. But before they reached me, the king's voice cut through like steel. He stays. Majesty! He stays! The king roared, slamming his claw against the throne's armrest. The chamber shook with more than just weapons fire. It shook with authority, with something primal. Even the commander didn't dare argue again. The king turned his eyes to me, and despite the world collapsing around us, his tone was calm. Daniel, do you fear death? I hesitated, heart hammering. I'd be lying if I said no. Good, he said, leaning forward. Only fools claim they do not fear, but hear me. Today, your fear will not chain you. It will sharpen you. Before I could reply, the chamber doors burst open. Sparks rained as a squad of enemy soldiers stormed in, armor marked with jagged crimson emblems. They weren't here for prisoners. Their weapons were raised. Our guards intercepted, plasma fire tearing through the air. The clash was deafening, metal on metal, energy blades sparking against shields. I staggered back, instinct screaming at me to hide. But one enemy soldier broke through the defense, charging straight at the throne with a roar. His blade glowed hot, ready to cut through the old king. Without thinking, I moved. Maybe it was madness. Maybe it was instinct. I grabbed a fallen guard's sidearm from the floor. It was heavy, alien, unfamiliar, but when I pulled the trigger, it spat a blinding bolt of energy that seared through the attacker's chest. The soldier crumpled. Smoke rose from the blackened hole. I froze, staring at the weapon in my hand, my breathing ragged, my body trembling. I had never killed before. The king's gaze found me, not with pity, not with horror, but with something else. Recognition. You see, he said quietly, even as chaos raged around us. The galaxy forgets the truth about humans. They think you weak because you build homes instead of thrones, because you cherish life instead of clinging to crowns. But when the moment comes, you act. The commander crushed the last invader with a strike of his blade, his armor splattered with sparks. He looked at me, surprise in his eyes, though he quickly masked it with a sneer. Beginner's luck. The king ignored him. He rose to his feet, steady despite his age. His voice carried over the din. No more running, no more hiding. Signal the fleet, prepare for counter-strike. Majesty, the commander warned, we're outnumbered 10-1. Then let them count, the king thundered. Orders flew, engines roared, the ship banked hard, diving into formation. Through the viewports, I saw the void ignite with fire. Plasma bolts streaked between ships, explosions blooming like suns. 3 vessels against dozens. It was madness. But something was different now. The king stood at the helm, his presence electrifying the crew. Voices that had wavered before now rang with conviction. Every soldier fought harder, faster, with purpose. Not for survival, for their sovereign. And for the first time, I felt it too. That pull, that fire. Like standing next to a storm and realizing it carried you with it instead of crushing you. The ship's cannons roared, tearing through enemy hulls. One hostile cruiser exploded in a burst of molten shards. Cheers erupted across the deck. Yet for every ship we downed, more swarmed in. The battle raged, endless. The commander's voice grew sharp. We can't hold this line forever. The king's gaze cut toward me. His mandibles twitched, the faintest hint of a smile. Daniel, you wanted to know what kindness births? Watch closely. He raised a clawed hand and pressed it against a console. The hollow map flared, a hidden beacon signal surging outward into the stars. The commander's eyes widened. Majesty, you summoned them. The king's smile was grim. You thought only enemies would answer a king's return? For a heartbeat, the void outside was silent but for the chaos of war. Then space itself tore open. Dozens of new slipstream signatures ignited across the darkness. Ships, massive, armored, regal, emerged one after another. Not enemy craft, allies, entire fleets, long thought destroyed, rising like ghosts from forgotten corners of the galaxy. The tide had shifted, and it had all begun with a single shuttle ticket. The void between the stars was a battlefield tonight, a dance of death and fire. 3 ships, outnumbered, outgunned, had dueled against impossible odds. Now the tide was turning. Hulls glittered across the darkness, stretching from horizon to horizon. Banners snapped in the void winds, colors I didn't recognize, but the soldiers on board clearly did. Cheers and battle cries erupted across the comms, voices hailing their allegiance to the king. By the sovereign's crest, we ride again. For the crown eternal, long live the true line. The faces of my crew, grimy and weary moments ago, now shone with hope. They'd held out in the face of overwhelming odds, and now their sacrifice had paid off. The commander stared at the display, his jaw slack, momentarily stunned into silence. Dozens, maybe hundreds of warships had appeared out of the darkness, flanking us, sealing off any hope of escape. The void between the ships blazed with engine fire, reflecting in the hard glint of their hulls. And as they moved, a single terrible thought echoed in my mind. The enemies that had come to crush us suddenly found themselves outnumbered, but they weren't about to surrender. The flagship snarled, its guns roaring, opening fire. The new arrivals scattered, their tight formation breaking apart. But even as they dodged incoming beams of plasma, they pushed on, slamming into the enemy. From the bridge, the view was hellish and glorious. The ships of the Armada crashed into the enemy like a wave breaking on a cliff. Explosions rippled across the void, lighting up the darkness with fleeting beauty. Then the new arrivals surged forward, pressing the attack, driving the enemy deeper into the maelstrom. One of the enemy ships lurched, its engines flaring wildly as something rammed into its flank. It spiraled away from the fight, fleeing into the darkness, leaving the rest of the armada to duke it out amongst themselves. Still, the enemy flagship pressed on, trying to break through our lines. But for every ship that fell, two more seemed to rise in its place. The momentum was ours. Hope flared within me, chasing away the gloom of battle. The king stood taller than I had ever seen him, his age falling away in the glow of the battle. His mandibles spread wide in a fierce grin. The galaxy thought me alone. Let them see instead the truth, that loyalty does not die. It waits. With a final surge, the Allies broke through the enemy lines, sweeping aside the last of the resistance. The flagship, mortally wounded, fled into the darkness. As it went, the king turned, fixing his gaze on me. The firelight danced in his eyes, making them gleam like twin suns. The galaxy thought me alone. Let them see instead the truth, that loyalty does not die, it waits. I wanted to tell him it wasn't just him who had waited. I had waited too, for a chance to do something right, to make a difference. And in doing so, I had found something I never expected. I had found a purpose, a feeling of belonging. The rumble of engines reverberated through the flagship, drowning out the cheers of our victory. Beside me, the king paced the length of the observation deck, his scaled feet whispering on the polished metal floor. Every so often he would reach out, his clawed fingers grazing the cold viewport, his gaze fixed on the retreating enemy ships. They were fleeing now, their once proud armada scattered and broken like flotsam on the currents of our maelstrom. For a long moment he didn't speak. Then he turned, his eyes burning with a cold fire. That was not enough. I knew what he meant. No matter our victory here, the war was far from over. There would be other battles, greater challenges ahead. The thought sent a chill down my spine. "What do you want me to do?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper compared to the low thrumming of the ship. The king regarded me for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then he gestured out to the retreating enemy. "Bring them back. I want to show them mercy. I want to give them a choice." My brow furrowed. I understood his desire for vengeance. What he wanted to do to the enemy, what they had done to his people, to our alliance, would fill volumes of history. And yet here, he was offering them peace. I shook my head, confused. "They attacked us without provocation. They murdered our allies. How can you offer them mercy?" He stared out at the retreating ships. "Because vengeance does not heal the wounds of war, but hope might bring us together. I will offer them a chance to join us, to stand alongside humans and Syrians and all those who seek a better future for this sector. And if they refuse, then I will make sure they regret it." The king turned back to me, his eyes blazing with resolve. "Gather the council. We have much to discuss. And prepare yourself, Daniel. You will go with me when I speak with the leaders of this fleet." Fear pricked at me, but I forced it down. Questions burned on my lips, questions about the king, about his past, about why he had chosen me. But I knew this wasn't the time nor the place. Now was not the time for answers. It was the time for action. So I bowed my head. "Yes, Your Majesty." As I turned to leave, the king stopped me with a raised hand. "Daniel," he said, his voice softer now, the fire gone. "Thank you." He didn't elaborate, but I understood. He was thanking me for coming on this journey, for standing with him against impossible odds. And in that moment, I realized it wasn't just him who had changed. I had changed too. When I first arrived at the Citadel, I had been a man who simply wanted to escape his problems. And here I was now, preparing to lead a fleet in a battle to secure a better future for who knows how many worlds. "It was nothing, Your Majesty," I said, and meant it. Now we needed a miracle. We needed something to tip the scales in our favor. We needed to find the sovereign. I joined the king on the bridge as he addressed the assembled council. Their faces, a mixture of alien and human, reflected the gravity of our situation. My friends, we have won a great victory today, but the war is far from over. To win it, we must unite every being who values freedom and justice. His voice echoed with authority, commanding attention. I propose we take this opportunity to extend a hand of peace to the Akari fleet. If they join us, our victory today will echo throughout the ages, but if they refuse, then let us show them the strength of the sovereign's wrath. A murmur swept through the council, a tide of voices speaking in unison, their words carried by an ancient, intricate translator. The debate raged, passionate and intense, voices rising, falling, weaving together in a tapestry of argument and counterpoint. After what felt like hours, the discussion began to wind down. Finally, an alien representative, its skin like polished obsidian, rose to speak. "We cannot trust them," it said, its voice a resonant hum. "They attacked us without warning. Their queen murdered our ambassadors." The words hit home, a painful reminder of the stakes involved. "But surely," another voice chimed in, a young human woman with fiery red hair, "a chance at peace is worth more than vengeance. We have seen the strength of the sovereign. We have witnessed their courage and compassion. Surely some good can come of this." The room grew silent, all eyes turning towards the king. He sat still, his expression unreadable, the weight of their gazes pressing down on him. At last he spoke, his voice resonating with power. "There is wisdom in both our anger and our hope. We will approach the enemy, but we will not beg for peace. We will offer them a choice, a chance to join us or face the consequences." I watched, mesmerized, as the king rallied our forces, issued commands, each word carrying the weight of a king reclaiming his birthright. He moved with purpose, his steps echoing with the strength of his convictions. All around me, soldiers, aliens, and humans alike bustled with renewed vigor, their movements sharp and efficient. The flagship hummed with activity as it hurtled towards our next engagement.